We will begin track B with a first keynote on managing cybersecurity with business-facing services. Our keynote speaker for this session is Mr. Akshay Tiku, Director, Advisory Services, Ernst & Young LLP. Mr. Akshay Tiku is a cybersecurity professional with more than 15 years of experience in various aspects of cybersecurity. He has assisted clients from across industry sectors and helped them manage their cybersecurity risks. His clients are spread across geographies including America, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and the Indian subcontinent. Currently, Mr. Tiku focuses on assisting clients in securing their industrial consumer IoT and cyber defense strategies. He is Masters in Network and IT Infrastructure Management from Symbiosis Center for Information Technology, Pune. Mr. Tiku also holds many security, privacy, resilience, and security auditing certifications. He has also been a guest speaker in many cybersecurity events. Ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, please help me welcome Mr. Akshay Tiku right here on the stage for his session.
Thank you so much for the introduction. A very good afternoon to all of you. Well, just being a post-lunch session, the first response was not very encouraging. I was a bit afraid that, I may just kind of bore you because it's a post-lunch session. But I hope it's interactive and interesting. I'll try and keep it a bit light. Could I have the clicker, please? Okay, that's here. I've already been introduced, so there's no need of, the introductions. So moving on, I would have rather preferred walking, but then, you have a screen here. I don't want to block your view with myself being right in the center, so I'll prefer to speak from here. So managing cybersecurity, one of the most important aspects is to first understand how the environment is changing. If we see from where we started with, the mainframes way back in the 1970s, and then moving on to digital across, moving to the client-server architecture, the internet, e-commerce, and now the new buzzword, digitization, is there. The complexities have increased. We would talk about, in terms of recovery, we would just talk about backup, and then we talk about basic disaster recovery, and now we are talking about resilience. In terms of the data explosion, it was disconnected systems, and now we have IoT and the connected world, wherein everything is connected across. That brings in a lot of challenges in terms of the data that we hold. Also, in terms of the amalgamation of cyber and physical. Now we are into the cyber physical world where we have, the industrial control systems, you can actually control, what goes on in the physical world, like a nuclear reactor or, a power plant within that, or an oil and gas, or even transportation, the critical sectors. And even the government has a lot of focus on the critical sectors, and especially the security over the critical sectors with the NCIIPC and, the various regulations which are coming in. So the change is the only constant. It will continue to evolve. Very soon, your IoTs would be within our bodies. So it will not just be cyber physical, it would probably be cyber human as well. So, there'll be a lot of robotics within human bodies, and that would again increase the risk within the overall ecosystem. With that, with change being the constant, we go back to our clients every year and talk about what do they perceive within cybersecurity. We have a global information security survey that runs across the globe with about 1,800 respondents, across 20 industry sectors. And what we learned is that a substantial 86% of our clients said that the cybersecurity function within their organization didn't really fully meet their organization needs. That's surprising. There's so much of focus on cybersecurity. Everybody talks about cybersecurity. Most of the IT topics in conferences are related to security, but then still organization feels that our needs are not met. 57% responders have a recent cybersecurity incident. Now this figure actually could go up because not everybody would like to kind of accept that there has been an incident in their organizations. Another important aspect is about 90% do not even evaluate the financial impact of the cybersecurity incident that has happened in their organization. Probably that's one of the reasons where cybersecurity doesn't get that much of a focus, because if you really evaluate the financial impact on the business services and also on the customer-facing front that the cybersecurity incident has had, that gives your board, the organizations, the leadership, that view as to what is the seriousness of cybersecurity and why do we need that investment. Basic investments everybody has made, but investment into more robust processes, advanced technologies, and you need to be ahead of the hackers. So it's very important to understand the financial impact of cybersecurity on our businesses. In the connected world, again, where you've got mobile devices, you've got all of these connected devices. We asked them, what is it that are the biggest risks that you face? The first answer was, the top most rated answer was user behavior, user awareness and behavior, which is the weakest link within any cybersecurity practice. So if you have to manage cybersecurity within your organization, within the business services, you have to make sure that your user awareness learning program is top-notch. It covers the entire organization. It is not based on only classroom sessions of, let's say, 2 hours or 1.5 hours, wherein people will not have that recollection. Get in technology, you have the millennial generation coming into picture, in shorts, brief messaging, gamification. Include those into your programs to help, the awareness go up. The moment the awareness goes up, the risks would considerably go down as well. So, having talked about, by the way, these results were all part of our GISS. If you are interested, you can catch a copy of our Global Information Security Survey of 2018 at our kiosk outside. We have copies there, and you're free to avail them and read them at your leisure. We also have it on our website. You can download it if you prefer a digital copy. So, moving on, what are we preventing ourselves from? Basically, when it's intentional, we are talking about the hackers. What's the intention of these? Their motivation is twofold. One could be financial gains. That's the primary motivation. Or when it's state-sponsored, it's also about disruption of a particular country, or services within a country. So that's, again, a very important motivation. So, in the first case, if it's financial gains, they would aim for financial gains through intellectual property, through formulas, and so on and so forth, or direct money transfer. Typical targets could be pharma companies, financial institutions. That's where their target is, and it could be part of an organized crime. There have been attacks in the recent past as well, where swift transactions of banking systems have been directly been exposed, and they've actually pilfered about millions of dollars because of these attacks. However, when we move into the organization, the country disruption, the aims are totally different. They aim at critical infrastructures, disruption, safety systems which, when disrupted, where their availability or integrity is disrupted, could actually lead to loss of life, could lead to a high economic impact. Imagine a thermal power plant being stopped because of a cyber attack, or a nuclear power plant not being functioning because of a cyber attack for a considerable period of time. That would have a direct impact on the economy, because your grids won't be able to feed that much of electricity. The generation wouldn't be there. So it has an economical impact, which is the state-sponsored terrorism, the cyber war. I don't know how many of you remember Stuxnet, which happened a long time back. That was supposed to be, it is called the first weapon fully made out of code. Stuxnet, stopped more than 100 centrifuges in Iran's nuclear facility, and it was one of the first attacks on industrial control systems with that magnitude. But the problem, how do you save yourself, is one of the biggest problem is within 90 days of that Stuxnet attack, the code was available online free of cost to anybody to download and change. Now, it's not, we've gone way ahead of the traditional antiviruses, wherein it will be a signature-based technology. Because if it is changing, you don't have a signature to detect. So we'll talk about how and what organizations could do to safeguard them from these. But before we talk about safeguarding, we also need to understand what's the typical attack life cycle of a targeted attack. These attacks are not attacks which are something random happening over a period of time. They are very targeted, they are focused. Stuxnet, for example, was silent for a whole lot of time. For years it was silent till the time it found the conducive atmosphere, it reached the centrifuges, it found out that, okay, this is the place that I have wanted to reach and I have reached, and then it got activated. So it was just going across the network before being activated. So the first is basic intelligence gathering, from where it starts. Then the initial exploitation of your perimeter happens, where this, the piece of code, a malicious piece of code, I don't know what to call it. We call it a virus, you call it a APT or something beyond. These days with the non-persistent threats, the terminology would keep on changing. So it establishes its foothold, then through the initial exploitation, and then establishes a command and control center. Most of the organizations till a few years back were only focusing on outside attacks, people coming in from outside to inside. Nobody really focused on what could have happened if something is already in and going out. So that's where the command and control center was set up. The information was going from within the organization to outside, and this leads to a lot of my clients have received business email compromise. Emails stating that this is a vendor invoice, this is the invoice that has to be paid, this was the bank account, however, please change the bank account to so-and-so and transfer the payment. We've known of instances where these transactions have actually gone through. Finance function or the of the organizations need to be strengthened from a process perspective to ensure that even before we send these payments, it's a proper checking mechanism has to be established to ensure how we are transferring payments within our systems. So that's also an important aspect within the organization, apart from the fact that you need to have latest tools also in place, and along with awareness to stop this. So once they're there, they escalate their privileges and then lead to data extraction, and they're there at a persistent mode. This is the typical kill chain or the attack's life cycle. But what is interesting and disturbing at the same time is, I don't know if it has a pointer, but if you look at it, at what point it is detected? Usually, once the data exfiltration has happened, usually when the data exfiltration has already happened is the time when the third parties or somebody, I'm okay with that. Third party or somebody actually detects the attack, whereas the actual detection through, you can say, through advanced threat intelligence and advanced technology should actually happen at the initial exploitation stage. If something is something is trying to enter into your organization. So that's the entire gap that is there within the organization from a cybersecurity perspective. All your business services are impacted by those, and this is what you need to do. It's not just to your customers and clients. At the end of the day, it is your own business function, your procurement, your finance, and all of those functions within the organization which get impacted with these malware, these APTs getting into your systems. When they go into your system and they extract data, data is a high value target. So this is the data. Data is the currency. This is the age of information, right? Of all the hacks that have happened, from LinkedIn to the recent hacks that have happened, all of that information is available on the dark web, many a times free of cost, but many of time with a very little amount to be paid off. So what we have done and we found out is that, for example, if you have a LinkedIn account, which you had probably, a lot of people don't bother to have different passwords for their social media accounts and their organizational accounts or organization email. So the user IDs and plain text passwords were available on the net. You download them, you do a filter on the organization. LinkedIn has your organization information as well, which is available there. If you have a record of 1,000 people, chances are you may have 1 or 5 people at least who've not, probably the chances are more, but we found at least 5 people in a limited set to have the same user ID and password still existing. or they've circled back with the 5 passwords they were normally using to the first password now, and we could enter into the system from outside using nothing, no hacking, just go to the dark web, download a set of credentials, and enter into the organization. So that's how easy it becomes after data exfiltration. The cost of data, you can see there's a scan of a password. Could anybody tell me as to, within the values A, B, C, and D, what would be the value of one information record related to a passport available on the dark web? Any ideas? Anybody here? $1? €1? Anybody else? Well, from what we know is it's about 25 euros for a scan of a passport. If it is just a name and email address, it will go to about €1 to €5, depending on the guarantee of the data, authenticity of the data that is being provided. The dark web works in a lot way manner that we have. If it's without a guarantee, it will be much cheaper. But if it's coming along with a guarantee of data replacement, it will be, let's say, €5. But a password is 25 euros. And with a lot of other information, typically with the guarantee and all, it goes up to about 50 euros. Now imagine 50 euros and you just get 100,000 records. How much you have to pay for a whole lot of the information that you get. It's very small information, small money to be paid for a very large quantum of information that could be used for terrorism activities, because you've got identification, you've got telephone connections, a whole lot of things that can be done. And most of us just sign self-attest forms and give it. I would suggest, as a personal thing, please write the purpose of the self-attestation so that it cannot be reused. That's just the best practice that I use. So it's good if everybody else also uses the same. You can even rent a hacker on the dark web. So organizations have started renting hackers. Corporate espionage is not just a Western concept anymore. Corporate espionage is actually, a very much part of the Indian, this thing also. You can rent a hacker for very low. You don't have to meet him. You have to give him the target, and the hacker would do the job for you. Payment is made in Bitcoin, becoming more and more difficult now through the legislations which have been brought in and the instructions that have gone to the banks for not processing anything related to Bitcoin. But there are ways and means of still achieving it through various channels. So where should the focus be for developing effective cybersecurity framework? Of course, awareness we talked about. But before that, we need to understand what are the key factors that impact this technology. Regulatory and compliance. LODR, the SEBI's legal obligatory disclosure requirements which are there, listing obligation disclosure requirements are there. Mandate that the board reviews the cybersecurity posture for listed companies, top 500 listed companies, every year, and reports it. So that in itself is a very big component which has come out from SEBI. So that the board now has to actually, if they were not really concerned about cybersecurity or not really asking too much, now they have to ask, and a risk management committee has to be formed which will typically look at that. And this is across all listed, irrespective of the sector within the organization. Data management is a very important aspect which is leading to these changes in the technology environment. Digitization of not just old records, but new records which are coming in the digital format, changing market trends, rapid technology adoption, which brings in the question of shadow IT. A lot of times, if your own IT is not able to support you in rapid technological deployments, businesses, functions directly go to the third-party vendors and say, can you do this for me? And they'll host a website. IT wouldn't even know about what's especially happening. So shadow IT becomes a problem there. And risk management in itself has to be adopted by the organizations to operate in this dynamic landscape. But to do all of this, one of the most important is that the board, the top leadership must become involved in the cybersecurity, understand cyber risk. And that's where even the government focuses through the SAB, LODR regulations. Your risk appetite goes from top to down. It's your board, it's your senior management, it's people like you who would decide what's the risk appetite that we can achieve, what is our appetite. And it has to be supported with implementation of leading standards and regulations from bottom up. But more importantly, your framework, how you manage your security has to be your way of managing security. It should not be somebody else's way of managing security. For that, you need to analyze your own risks. What are the risks that the business is facing, the business services are facing, the customers are facing from your side. Once you've done this assessment, then only you can come up with a robust plan of action. And it is also important to have a roadmap in place, because you should not be struggling each time to define what is the next steps that we have to do. Define that robust action in place, define your processes in place, and at the same time look at technology. I don't know, contrary to popular belief, technology alone would not solve your problems. You can buy a product, but it will not solve your problem unless you don't have the governance, you don't have the processes, and you don't have the management support. You may have the budget to buy a technology, but if you don't have the processes and governance around with that, it would be very difficult for organizations to sustain in future around the security, with the changing landscape. So, you have to look at how insider threats could materialize. You have to look at the appropriateness of your risk management framework, the disclosures that are required by regulators, and the suitability of the governance structures. Also, an important aspect is to understand your assets. What is it that is important for you? What are the assets that you hold within the organization? Now, this also becomes important. These are very basic things which everybody thinks that it's very easy to do. But trust me, these are the most important and difficult factors. A lot of the CIOs that I've interacted with are struggling to get their inventory base correct in terms of even knowing what is it that they have, what is the data that they hold, and who is the owner of it. Even the storage of the data these days becomes very difficult to know where the data is stored. You don't need to solve that problem by having that data probably at centralized place. That may not really be the best way of going ahead, but you definitely need to devise your strategies accordingly. So just protecting your organization is not enough. If you look at the NIST, anybody has gone through the NIST cybersecurity framework, it talks about identify controls, it talks about protection controls, detect, respond, but also be ready for recover controls. The entire cycle is important for any organization to manage cybersecurity within their business services. It is important to identify the crown jewels, determine your risk appetite, set up an operating model and a culture of security through top-down as well as a bottom-up approach. Some of the guiding principles will be focus on the impact, enhance cyber skills and capabilities of your existing people, and also, when you hire more and more skill set, ensure that they have the set capabilities. And you also should benchmark yourself against other industries, but that benchmark should not be that, X is doing this, I will also do that. But you have to look at that benchmark, but you also have to look at risk and impact, which is important. It is going to be a continual and likely never-ending battle to stay ahead of cybercrime. And unfortunately, not every battle will be won. So we should be aware of that there will be misses, but we have to learn from those misses and proceed ahead. It's not necessary that every attack will be stopped, but what is important is we take the right learning from those attacks and proceed further. With that, thank you very much. If there are any questions, if at all. Thank you so much for your time.